Hello, friends.
Hello.
Hi,
Can
Justin.
anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Yep.
Great. Any chance I get to see any of your smiling faces before I start a screen share?
No way.
Oh my gosh, you people. You know I don't judge.
I know.
All right. Okay. Oh, there's, you know, there's something bittersweet about this gathering of people. I see so many veterans here coming to talk and hear and share about something as routine as um, our contracts. And today we're going to talk about buyer agency. You know what the bitter part is that so many of our brand new agents aren't here to talk and learn. And that drives me bananas. So if you have
That's
any
because
ideas,
they haven't been beat up enough yet by not having done it. Trust me, we know.
so I've got two pressing issues that I'm dealing with today. One, I'm not going to get into. The other one is it was the failing of a buyer's agent um, to adequately investigate an easement, which was disclosed in the seller's property disclosure. They elected the contingency for covenants, deeds, restrictions, which is specifically for investigating easements. But they failed to order the title search to fully understand that easement. They didn't get that report back until after the contingency. In fact, the week before closing, and the buyers walked away without the right to do so. And that was the buyer's agent's fault. It was our listing. That was 2 years ago, and we're getting ready to go to court here later in April. I'll be testifying on behalf of our client, the seller, who's suing at the upper limit of what he can, um, which is $12,000. So $12,000 in 2 years of time on the line, that a buyer's agent who wasn't paying attention to the priorities of their buyer, that's what created that situation. So thank you guys for coming here, but it feels a little bit like preaching to the choir. So if you have any ideas on how to bring people in, maybe I shouldn't be doing the trainings. Are you tired of hearing me talk?
No, you have a soothing voice, but I always say I'm almost in 20 years now, and I learn something every single time I take a training. I learn something new every single day, whether I want to or not.
That's the truth. And, half the time it's something that we knew once upon a time and forgot.
Yep. Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So, all right.
I
Enough of,
agree, Justin. Not to interrupt, but I agree with you. The new agents need to be on here, but I always learn something new.
and it's not our problem specifically as a brokerage, it's an industry issue. Um,
Correct.
So if
For
you
sure.
find a youngster out there, grab them by the arm, invite them, and try and bring them into the fold so that we can. And yes, Caitlin, I recognize you as a new. So you're on the you are not on the naughty list. So thanks for
She's a
taking
good
the time.
egg.
Yeah.
Caitlin's a good egg.
All right, guys, here we go. I'm going to start a screen share here. And oh, before I start, is there anything in particular you really want me to dig into?
No, buyer agency is the commanding thing right now. And
Yeah.
just in case some of you don't know it, the ABR is the class is still for free. You can get that and then finish up your designation with a couple other things. If you've been in any length of time, it'd be easy.
But good point there, MJ. ABR, accredited buyer representative, was made free through NAR, kind of as penance, for us being in the situation. They felt bad about it. That's like a $299 course. Just that keystone course of the ABR called ABR. And if you take that, it's going to help you to work through your value proposition and get your lips used to saying the words, you have to pay my commission, or you may be responsible for my commission if we aren't fortunate enough to have that fee subsidized by the seller. So, thanks for that plug. Without any specific direction, I'm just going to go and do what I've already kind of rehearsed here in the past. Bear with me as I get my screen share on point.
The buyer agency interviews were very useful. I'm glad you recorded them. Thank you.
Sure. Not the only ways to do it, but they, can help get your brain going. So you guys can see my dot loop, which is what I generally organize these trainings with, just to have all of the forms available so I can hop back and forth. First thing is always buyer agency is about laying the foundation of professionalism. And if you start on day one, square one, first contact with these clients about establishing your value as a buyer agent, by the time you get to the commission discussion, they're going to be ready to sign with you whenever you ask. Am I wrong? Do you guys have common experiences there?
No, it works.
In the old days, I used to say, I don't want to work with you if you don't want to work with me. I'm not going to force you to sign this. That was a disarming tactic. Um, y- you know, and you can still do that at some level, but you do have to have them make some sort of commitment with you. That's the law, except in Alabama. But they do all kinds of things different in Alabama. Um, let's start with when we meet these people, whether we meet them in the conventional sense, like we all meet people at the bowling alley, at church, at the dog park, or whatever, you're already creating rapport from the jump. You're already talking with them and you're working with them. If you meet them in the new modern fashion, I guess it's not even new or modern anymore, but through online sources, Zillow, whatever, we'll call that speed dating or online dating. People are meeting their spouses that way right now and have been for quite some time. It's not a new development, but you have to start building that rapport before you meet them in person. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of awkward. As a former bartender, I could pick out people who were being set up through online dating when they would come in for their first date because it was pretty weird, and you can tell. Um, Send that person your value proposition via email. Send them your resume. Send them a link to your Zillow reviews. Send them a buyer's guide from NAR that tells them what questions they should be asking their buyer's agent. And if you don't know my list of favorite resources, I'm going to share that with you right now. That's parealtors.org. Bookmark that, and it's the most powerful resource you have when it comes to standard forms and resources. So if we're dealing with standard forms, we can go in and see any changes that might be going on. We can access their speed bar of resources. We can go to the buyer agency contract. You can view that right here. And then once you bring up the buyer agency contract, you can go right down here and view the guidelines for preparation and use. This is the guide, right? This is what brokers go to for understanding. PAR is where I go for understanding. So if you want to have this access to the same resources as me, you can pay. Oh, wait, you already paid for it. It's free. So PAR is going to give you that stuff. You can also find blogs. If you have a specific topic that you would like to research, you can type that in up here and just search, and it'll bring up a whole host of answers for you. Another good resource is NAR. NAR, I used to kind of discount, but I gotta say, under the pressure of the lawsuit, they have stepped up their game in providing value
Yep,
to their membership.
yep,
Um, that's no BS. I'm not just being a yes man. I used to use PAR exclusively, but now with just simple stuff like these consumer guides, I think there's 20 of them now.
yep.
And these guides are going to help you create value. So when you meet that person, whether it's at the dog park or via online dating through Zillow, the moment you get that contact, you can start building your reputation by sending them this information. You can send them consumer guides regarding whatever their priority might be, 10 questions to ask a buyer's agent, and you tailor your resume to answer these questions. Do you think your competition is ready to answer all these questions? I hope not. Let's spoil their day by putting these questions in your prospective client's mind. Now, when the consumer notice, as we all know, is not a contract, but it's important enough to the state of Pennsylvania that it's required by all consumers of real estate services. So let me go through that with you, Mr. Buyer. I hope to represent you as your buyer's agent. When we sign our exclusive agency agreement, we'll be forging a fiduciary relationship. And fiduciary literally means servant. That doesn't mean I'm going to do your windows or your laundry. It does mean, though, that I have obligations to you. And those obligations are outlined in this document. And it tells you what I have to do for you. That's what I do for you as a buyer's agent. To paraphrase, I have to represent your best interest at every turn. A seller's agent will be doing the same thing for their client. And if I have a pre-existing relationship with you and I have a listing, that would make me a dual agent. And if you're in any way uncomfortable with me representing both sides, which I feel comfortable with in many situations, but if you're uncomfortable with that, my broker will designate another agent to represent you uh, in a portion of this agreement or a portion of the negotiations. Do you have any questions? Great. So that's what you're doing at your first substantive conversation when you're talking about what? What does substantive mean when we're talking about consumers of real estate? I have a $5 gift card for the first person to answer what substantive relation or substantive conversation means. I'll give you a hint. The initials are M and M. 3, 2, 1. Nobody gets a gift card.
Money and motive.
Money and motivation. That's right. Money and motive, money and motivation. So the M&Ms um, are what you're talking about here. Thanks, MJ. I knew you knew it. Okay. Any questions on that consumer notice? Do you understand how that can be, when we send out our resume to a buyer's agent or to a buyer as a buyer's agent, maybe we're doing an in-person or an online consultation, and we use the consumer notice to lay the brickwork for our professionalism. Do you see how that can help to establish that? Let's talk a little bit, you know, about what a buyer's consultation looks like. Does anybody insist on doing a buyer's consultation with a client before they hit the street with them?
Amen.
I mean, it used to be
Absolutely.
pretty easy when I was commitment averse, when I was a young agent and I just wanted to get a sale. I'll meet you at the property, no problem. First of all, that's not safe, especially for young ladies. Second of all, we can't do that I mean, we can't just go in for the kill after having met somebody 0 times at the property and say, here, sign this exclusive agency agreement. There is a higher than um, there's a higher likelihood of failure on that. I would never ask someone to sign a exclusive buyer agency the first time I met them, just because it's too soon and human nature is not really wired to trust somebody on first meeting. That's why I advise you to send the resume, send a video, send them your links, try and establish that stuff in advance. Meet them in person at the office. And then when you meet them at the first property, is that the first time you're meeting them? No, you've already talked to them 3, 4 times. That can all be in the course of a day or two. And you meet them at the property on the second or third day, you're going to have a much higher likelihood of getting that buyer agency signed than if you went in for the kill dead cold. And I don't mean go in for the kill, but try and close this relationship. So what are some of the questions we're going to ask them at our first substantive meeting to pre-qualify this client?
Will this be your first home?
Will this be your first home? Great. Have you been looking for a while? Yes, no. Yes, you have been looking kind of casually. Oh, you've been looking seriously. Have you worked with other agents before? Then why are we talking? How did they not meet your needs? Somebody will tell you what you need to do to get their business. All you have to do is ask the right questions. So do that. Have you spoken with a lender? Quicken, that's great. How did you get in contact with Quicken? Oh, you saw their ad. That's wonderful. Let me talk to you a little bit about some of the positives of Quicken Loans. Let's talk about some of the positives of a local lender. Let me speak from experience on this. Quicken Loans is a great operation. They wouldn't be where they are today if they didn't know what they were doing. However, just like with any large organization, it's tough to say what you're going to get. When you call the 1-800 number, you don't know if you're getting the 25-year veteran who's on top of their game or the guy who's been doing it for 25 minutes and he's just passed his first licensing exam. That's why I like to use my trusted local lender. I know what I'm going to get. And you know what? Their reputation's on the line, as opposed to some of these large bulk lenders. Nothing against Detroit, but I don't know those people. And I can't tell you whether we're getting their A game or not. But if I use Micah from Fidelis, I know that his reputation's on the line, and this deal means as much to him as it does to me when it comes to feeding his family. These folks in these large warehouse lending operations, they're pre-qualifying 50,000 people a month. And if your deal doesn't get to closing, it doesn't even ruin their day before lunchtime. But your business is important to me. So I think it's important to make those distinctions, bring it home. And why do you as a agent care whether or not they use a local lender? Excellent point, nobody. Come on.
Can you repeat the question? My kids are home and I'm struggling focusing. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Thank you, Brandy. Um, wait, Brandy. Um,
Yes.
why is it important to use a local lender rather than one of the large online warehouse lenders?
Well, number one, you can reach them. Like I can reach my people at 10 o'clock at night if I need to,
Yep,
or on a weekend, or on a
yep,
holiday.
yep,
They tell you right from the get go whether it's going to happen or not happen.
yep.
There's no
Why do you trust them?
sugarcoating
Why do you trust them more than a online West Coast online, nobody met them lender?
because I've used them hundreds of times and I know how they operate.
And I have seen a dozen times this year already where somebody went to a local lender and they got turned down, and then they found a online lender who approved them, and guess how that deal went?
It didn't go.
It didn't go. Or if it got there, it was the most stressful situation for everybody involved. People crying. If I knew it was going to be this hard, I never would have bought a house. Just awful, right? Not worth the aggravation. Another thing that happens is when you file your mortgage application, these online people who are buying leads from the credit bureau are going to start calling the client. We saw that happen. They went with the bait and switch with the teaser rate from somebody from Michigan, and they missed the closing date, and that deal never closed. And now there's a lawsuit against that lender for totally dropping the ball. And who's got time for that? Show of hands. That's what I thought. Okay. So those are some of the important things to touch on your opening buyer consultation, in addition to the touchy-feely things. You're using those to set up your professionalism, but then we're also saying, what's important to you in a home? Stairs, are they a no-no? Do you need a backyard? Do you have pets? Do you enjoy walking? What's your lifestyle like? Describe it to me. And then something I do whenever I'm working with clients, I tell them, when we start seeing homes, I'm going to ask you to start rating them 1 through 10. Give it a grade. I don't care what grading system you use, but I want you to speak out loud from the moment we walk in the front. Well, not necessarily. That's how it used to be before there was Ring doorbells and cameras in houses. But I want you to make note of the things that you love about this house and the things that you hate about this house. Don't tell me while we're there. We're going to talk about it when we get back to the car, about the things that you love. And I want you to rate this house 1 through 10 so that I can understand more about what's important to you. Now, that's a twofold thing, guys. It's not just about me understanding, it's getting them to process their thoughts on the property. How many
I've
times?
got an index card. I've got an index card for every property we're going to see today. And I want to have you write down things that you've noticed that you like or don't like on each one of them.
Yep.
And then when we get as many as 3, I want you to throw one out. For every 3 houses, you're going to throw one out.
Okay. Because only winners count, right?
Mm-hmm.
I give them an MLS sheet because it's easy to lose track of what house you were in when you're seeing more than 3.
Yep.
So I give them an MLS sheet and ask them to make their notes on the MLS sheet.
Yeah, that works.
And what we're trying to do, people aren't in touch with their emotions, right? They don't know. You've heard buyers are liars how many times? And if you hadn't heard it, you will hear it. But buyers say they want this, but they don't know because they have to actually get in their experience. They have to open their mouths. They have to talk about it because most people process their thoughts by speaking them. That's why people talk to themselves and why it's important to have face-to-face discussions. for us to process our own thoughts and get in touch with our own motivations. I usually don't like to do the icky emotional thing, but it's the absolute truth. So that's why we get our clients to open up and verbalize what their thoughts are on a property, not just type it in a text, but actually tell us, I can't stand the color brown or whatever. What do you love about the house? What do you hate about the house? Get them to get in touch with their feelings, and you'll get to the root of their motivations a lot quicker. So that's enough about that. Let's get down to contracts, the exclusive buyer agency contract. In order to make sure that you have the most up-to-date agreement, you'll look in the bottom right-hand corner and it will tell you what date revision we're dealing with. Okay? Just useful to check that out every once in a while. And on the exclusive buyer agency contract, I urge you to be as complete as possible, and I'm going to be making available some cheat sheets later this week for what we should be filling out on each of our forms. But you're going to put in your broker, that's company, not me. We're going to put in the company license number. That is a RB number or an RO number, not the RM number. When you read RM, you should think real estate manager or something like that in your head. That's what I am. I'm the RM. RB is the brokerage itself. Put down your address, put in your name, your state license number, most likely an RS or an AB, your contact information, and then your complete buyer information. I urge you to be as thorough as possible in case you get locked up for the weekend or go on vacation and I need to reach out to somebody. This is one place where I might be able to find that information. Actual physical address, phone number, email, please. I really don't need a fax number. Buyer understands, and this is important, guys. This one's super important, is does buyer have a written agreement, such as a buyer agency contract with another broker? Yes or no? And if yes, you've got some explaining to do. So I want you to look them dead in the eye if possible and say, are you working with another agent? Or have you worked with another agent recently? Have you worked with another agent recently? I have added that part because of my own misfortune. I had a listing. I had sold this listing in the past. It just came back around. And one of our agents had it listed. And somebody called me, said, hey, I would like to see this property. I said, great. Hadn't met them before. This was a Zillow lead. And I showed them the property. I said, are you working with another agent? Clear as day. They said, no, we are not. They were relocating to the area from Long Island. Showed them the property. They love it. They want to make an offer. I got them signed up to everything, except for, in those days, we didn't have to have this signed, and I gave everyone one free ride before getting them signed to an agreement. It came time to sign the agreement. They said, uh-oh, that looks familiar. We were in Lancaster a few months ago and wanted to see a property through Zillow, saw it with another agent, and he made us sign a buyer agency agreement. So I had to pay a 25% referral to this agent in Lancaster who had showed them one property like 4 months ago. So that's why I think it's important to ask, are you working with an agent or have you worked with an agent recently? Um,
Can I ask you a question?
please
Real life
do.
scenario. Okay, so yesterday I had an agent reach out to me who's in Maryland, who I have done showings for and all that. Like I know who she is. So she has a buyer that she's been working with that's interested in a mobile home up here. She doesn't want to do the drive for it. So she asked me if I was okay paying her a referral fee if this lady buys it through me.
Yeah.
Where that gets funky is she's obviously under contract with this agent. So how do I protect myself? Because then my thought was, well, I just do a contract for just that property. Answer yes, that they have a contract, but for Maryland, I guess. I don't really know. How do I cover myself there?
Uh, get a written referral agreement from that
Okay.
agent for this property, and you
Okay.
will be protected. Have them sign this, and under yes, the explaining that you're going to do is client referred by Patty
Okay.
Smith.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. And then you'll be able to trace that back and show the referral agreement from Patty. Um, and you're all good, and you can't be convicted of interfering with an agency relationship.
Yeah,
Not
I
that
don't
it's
need that.
convictable.
Thank you.
Yeah. Starting and ending dates. How long can this, starts when signed, right? Ends when?
Isn't it a year minus a day or something?
Yeah. Yep. It's a year minus a day, theoretically. Um, broker fees. No law or association of realtors has set or recommends broker fee. So, um, somebody tell me how much you work for?
$5 grand or 3%, whichever is greater.
5 grand or 3%, whichever is greater. Do you charge a broker fee? I've heard about these broker fees.
We have a back office fee to cover administrative things. It's $3.95.
Is that an additional cost or does that come out of your end?
Between you and me, that's going to depend.
It does. It certainly does, doesn't it? But
If it's a veteran, I will pay it every time.
yeah, sure.
Okay. If it's a long-term client, someone I've dealt with before and have a good relationship with, I will probably pay it.
It
If
is a
they're
big,
a
big
pretty much
bargaining
broke
chip.
first-time buyer, I might pay it.
Yep. And if they look like a jerk, they're
They're
paying it.
paying.
All right. Um, not
It
look
might be
like a jerk.
$4.95.
If they act like a jerk, the more they fight me, the less flexible I become. Um, so this is a this is the time where we have the discussion, right, guys? Um, or is there another time when you have the discussion?
When you find out on the contract uh, whether or not the other side is paying any of the buyer agent's fee. I'm
Okay.
currently under contract. The other side, the seller, is paying 2.5%, and my people are perfectly obliging about paying me the difference between that and the $5 grand because that is greater. It's not an
And
expensive
that's
house.
because you had this conversation with them
Oh, yeah.
before. You didn't wait until you got to the agreement of sale to bring up the situation. And if you've
Absolutely.
been around for a couple of years, I've been soapboxing on this for about, 3 years before the law change, saying you better know your value and you better have this conversation at the first, because when the commission structure changes, we want you to be ahead of the curve and comfortable with your lips making the words that
Yep.
Mrs. Hovetter expects me to bring home 3%. My broker expects me to give him $495. And we may be fortunate enough that the seller subsidizes some, maybe even all of that fee. But if they don't, then those are going to show up on the cost sheet. I'm going to work up a sample cost sheet, strictly worst case scenario, but I'm also going to make up one for you, kind of a best case scenario within our band of expected costs, just so you can see what that range might be. And then you can hit me up with any questions. Now, those costs extend to properties that are not represented by brokers as well. In fact, I charge a little bit more. My friend MJ, she charges 3% and $5,000. I'm pretty similar. Um, but when it comes to for sale by owners, I charge 4 and 5,000,
Yep.
at least. It's okay to charge more for different situations. You guys aware of that, right? I charge extra if I have to do some general contractor work. And I don't mean actually swinging a hammer, I just mean coordinating events. But that's on the listing side. On the buyer side, it's okay to charge more too, depending on what those situations might be. Something that's coming into focus pretty quick with our current economy and the change of the real estate market is a lot of agents are really, really considering charging advanced fees or retainers on the buyer side and the seller side of the contract. I would hate to list a property, spend a few $100 on signage, on pictures, a couple hours of driving out to Timbuktu a couple of times, and then they change their mind. I would strongly suggest, why don't we go ahead and charge that broker fee up front and say, hey, $495 or the broker fee is earned and due at the signing of this agreement. We're going to work together, and I'm not going to charge you that until closing. However, for some reason, should you decide not to, I reserve the right to collect that $495. Does anybody have any strong feelings one way or another about the option to do so?
I think it's a great idea. It's a good time to have a conversation about expectations.
Yeah.
And
And
Wish
I'm
I
kind of
had
not
done
create
that
saying that.
before.
I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, I wish I had known to do that before.
Yeah, me too.
Right? I mean, especially in spring market where you're writing 42 offers. You remember that one sales meeting? I don't know if anybody was there, but I said, who wrote the most offers for a single buyer before getting them accepted? I think it was 17.
something like that. Yeah,
And,
crazy.
what would happen if on 16 that buyer lost their spirit? They just no longer had the guts. At least the 495 is going to pay for some gas money, right? Um, I'm not saying you have to do it. I'm not saying you should do it. I'm saying I support the flexibility for you guys to have your own business model. And if that fits your business model, I've got your back. Go ahead and do it. You're not offending me by doing it. You're feeding your family. Now, if a buyer leases a property instead of buying a property, the broker's fee is, I usually put NA because I don't like showing leased properties or I don't like, being a leasing agent. But keep in mind, if you've written 16 offers and they start to get a weak stomach and they say, I'm just not going to make it work in this market environment, I decided to sign a lease. You could have an insurance policy here for yourself and actually be compensated for that, even though you weren't involved. Not sure if I advocate that or not, but I just want you to know your contract and know that there's little gems hidden all through here. Now, even though a broker's fee or a portion of it may be paid by a seller or a listing broker, this sounds like a great script. The broker will continue to represent the interests of the buyer. It's the broker's policy to accept compensation offered by a listing broker. That's called cooperating compensation. If a listing broker offers cooperating compensation that's less than the broker's fee, the buyer may authorize the broker to negotiate an increase by using a form such as cooperating brokers compensation agreement. Sellers sometimes offer to make financial concessions toward paying the buyer's. Actually, oh my gosh, guys, I just found an error in the PAR form. Is anyone
Whoa.
else as excited as me? Not necessarily an error, but it's slightly out of date. The old CBC allowed space for you to kind of counter, accept or not, but you can still use the cooperating broker compensation to
Oh, yeah.
negotiate for a higher one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to touch on that document next. So sellers sometimes offer to make concessions towards paying the buyer's cost at settlement, which could include some or all of the broker's fee, if not paid as cooperating compensation, but the buyer can negotiate the seller's concessions by including them in an agreement of sale. So this is a great time to discuss the three different buckets that contribute to our compensation, right? What are the three different buckets that we can get paid from at closing, guys? Who can pay us?
The seller,
The
the
buyer.
Right.
broker,
The
or
broker,
the buyer.
the buyer. And let's talk about the different places that we guarantee that compensation. If the broker's paying us, what form are we going to use, Glenda?
Co-broke.
Great. Who else has their ears on and can tell me if we're being paid directly by the seller, where do we guarantee that compensation?
Sale agreement.
Sales agreement. And if the buyer is paying it, what document is guaranteeing that?
Exclusive buyer agency.
Correct.
Oh,
Or the non-exclusive. But
right.
those are the three forms that come together to guarantee us. So the balance of the broker's fee is earned. Oh, hang on. Buyer understands and agrees that the broker receives less than the broker's fee agreed to in 2B through any combination of cooperating compensation and seller concessions on the agreement of sale. The buyer will be responsible for paying the remainder of the broker's fee due to broker at or before settlement. They hide it here in bold print, or I'm sorry, all caps, so that no one reads that. And then they put this next section in bold print. It says that the balance of the broker's fee is earned if the buyer enters into an agreement of sale during the term of this contract, no matter who was involved, whether that was brought on by the broker or one of our agents or another person, including the buyer. If the buyer defaults on the terms of an agreement of sale, the broker's fee will be paid by buyer to the broker at that time. So if I quit my job prior to closing and I lose my approval for a mortgage, do I still have to pay commission? Yeah, theoretically, because I quit my job. I was in default. Buyers advise that contacting a listing broker or seller directly may compromise the broker's to ability to earn that because of something called procuring cause. Now, if the buyer enters in an agreement of sale after the ending date of this agreement, the buyer will pay the broker's fee if the agreement of sale is a result of the broker's actions. So if I showed them the property and then our contract expires the next day, and the buyer is not under an exclusive agency contract with another broker at the time, I have earned my commission. Fun little scenario. Explain to me how that works if it's required for buyer's agents to have an agreement signed. How's that work? Anybody have any ideas? What one scenario would allow that to happen? What two scenarios?
Could it be a for sale by owner?
Three scenarios. Yeah, it could be a for sale by owner.
And expired?
Uh, which would be a for sale by owner, potentially.
Oh, true.
The other one would be if they went directly to the listing agent, they do not have to have an agency agreement.
True.
And if they had a non-exclusive agency agreement with another agent, we still earn that commission. Because it says if the buyer is not under an exclusive buyer agency contract with another broker at the time the buyer enters into the agreement. So if they sign a non-exclusive with another agent, if they go directly to the listing broker and don't have any kind of relationship, or if they're buying for sale by owner, that we showed them on Friday, and then our contract expires on Sunday, and then they write on Tuesday, we could make a claim for commission. Man, didn't I tell you there was some real gems in here?
Yeah.
Would that only be there, Justin, like say, if you wrote that in your offer, like that after the expiration date, I'm still due a commission within 30 days, or doesn't that matter?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Doesn't matter according to this.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Now, just because you're right and you go to court doesn't mean you win.
That is true.
So the contract's in our favor. This is a very narrowly, scoped kind of scenario or set of scenarios, but there is a possibility that you could have earned commission here. At least, at the very least, we can be right, but it doesn't mean that we're going to get paid on it. It would be an uphill battle to fight this one, to be honest. So dual agency. What's our brokerage's policy on dual agency, and what is dual agency? So dual agency is when I have in my mind, dual agency is when you have a signed agreement with both parties. But in my mind, dual agency is when you have a pre-existing relationship with both parties. So if I have a listing and somebody calls me to see that listing, I will have a discussion with that consumer, the buyer, who is a customer, not a client. And I will tell them the listing belongs to a client of mine. I have a pre-existing relationship. They are my client. You just walked into my real estate store. I'm sure you understand that I can't offer you the same level of representation that I have with Bob, who I've known for 5 years. That doesn't change my obligation to deal with you honestly and in good faith and to give you the information you need to make a good decision. I can absolutely prepare this agreement for you. However, you understand that I'm working for Bob in this case. If you're uncomfortable with that, we can make sure that you have an agent designated to assist you but that's the discussion I have. So what is dual agency? Dual agency is whenever I have Bob's house listed, and then my buddy Sam calls me up, who I've known just as long as Bob, and says, I didn't even know Bob was selling. I've always loved that house. You know, you've been showing me homes all around the neighborhood. Can we have a look at Bob's place? Yep, sure thing, Sam. However, let me talk to Bob.
I thank you.
This could definitely be a dual agency situation because I'm representing you both right now. If he's cool with that, then I'll definitely get you in there. If he's not comfortable with that, I'm going to have another agent show you the property. So, what's the standard when it comes to agency? Guys, we got to represent our best interest, the best interest of our client at every turn. That's our job. That's our fiduciary responsibility. How does that change?
I don't like doing dual agency, and most times I won't do dual agency. It's very rare if I do both sides. I actually had a seller one time, and I've been in 27 years. So, but I had a seller say to me one time when there was a problem with the appraisal, who are you representing in this situation? Like, who am I going to fight the hardest for it? And that kind of made me realize that that's tough to do when you have
Boy, it
problems.
sure is, isn't it?
Yes. So
It's
ever
tough.
since then, I just tell people I don't do dual agency.
And that client, you know, um, were they somebody that called you on a sign? Did you know them? Did they just kind of walk up and say, I'd like to see it?
Um, I don't think I had a relationship with them. No, that
Okay.
was a while back. I mean, it's been a lot of years. That's why I just don't do it anymore. But
And I don't like dual agency either. I mean, I prefer to represent my seller.
yeah,
And will I write an agent for, or will I write an offer for that buyer? You're darn right I will. But I make it clear that
Absolutely.
I work for that seller and I'm representing that seller. And that seller knows who I'm working for, and so does the buyer. And if anything goes sideways, there's not going to be a question.
I
Uh,
usually just tell them I'm going to refer it to another agent in my office and then take a referral fee.
and that's totally safe too.
Yep,
Yep.
absolutely.
I just feel more comfortable doing that than I don't want to be in court if I don't have to be.
Oh, man, words to live by.
Yeah.
Now, dual agency, the standard is slightly changed, right? You're not representing your best interest at every turn. Your standard is now to do no harm to either party. You're like
All
a
right.
doctor. First, do no harm. Um, that's a slippery slope. It's tough, and you better make sure that everyone understands what you're getting into before you get there.
Yeah.
Designated agency. Um, the broker designates the licensee stated above to exclusively represent the interest of the buyer. If the licensee is also the seller's agent, then the licensee is a dual agent. That explains how that works. So, broker services to others. Broker may not take action that is inconsistent with the buyer's interest. Period. However, the broker may provide services to a seller for which the broker may accept a fee. Such services may include, but are not limited to, listing a property for sale, representing the seller as a seller agent, deed and document prep, ordering certifications required for closing, all the things that we need to do. And what this is speaking about specifically, or kind of alludes to, is if I'm representing a buyer, let's say for a for sale by owner property, am I doing work for the seller that is different and distinct from what I'm doing for the buyer? Yes.
Yep.
Am I justified in collecting fees for that additional work? Yes.
Yeah.
You know, um, and you shouldn't feel ashamed to do that. Everybody else does it with a clear conscience, but somehow real estate professionals feel sheepish about charging for their time and their effort and their expertise and their liability. And I don't want you to. I want to normalize charging what you're worth. Um, But this is as good a time as any to talk about. We make a lot of money, potentially. When you're starting out, I mean, I remember when my average sale price was, like $110,000. And I was just tickled pink when I sold some for 130,000 and I split that 3% commission, 50% with my broker, and I brought that money home and I was so happy. Um, Now it's just as common to get 3% on a $500,000 home. $15,000 is a lot of money. And why are they hiring you guys? Used to be they were hiring you for access to a property because you could open doors that they couldn't get to. Now they know about a property going on the market before you do because they're getting text alerts on everything that hits the market. So they're calling you. And they can set up a showing through Zillow. They're no longer relying on you for information. They're no longer relying on you for access to a property. What they're relying on you for is to not make stupid mistakes. So you need to know your job because it's your job to protect them from the things they don't know and don't understand. Keep that in mind. $15,000 for the sale of a $500,000 property, that's probably less work than the 3% you're going to collect on selling a $100,000 mobile home on land.
Absolutely it is.
But still, the responsibilities are the same. You're there to protect your client from making a dumb mistake. So attention to detail is paramount, and it starts with this document. Broker and the licensee may show the same property to other buyers and may represent those buyers in attempts to purchase the same property that the buyer wishes to purchase. Broker does not breach any duty to buyer by showing a property the buyer is interested in to other prospective buyers. How you guys feel about that?
I've done it and it's always tricky. Usually they don't both want it. I've been lucky.
Yeah.
I actually had one where I had two clients on the same house and they both wrote. And
Yeah.
I did my best to be honest with both parties and not like, I just said, you have to write your highest and best offer.
Yep. You don't steer the ship. Each offer is a
Yep.
little bit different most of the time, right?
Yep.
And you know, this, buyer A may be able to make an all cash offer. Buyer B might be able to make a higher net price offer with financing. It just depends on the priorities of the seller. You haven't done anything wrong by trying to feed your family. You might be a little bit on the shady side if you're not transparent with people about it, and giving them the opportunity, because we do need to maintain those relationships. If buyer A loses the deal and buyer B gets the deal, and then buyer A finds out on Zillow that you're the one who sold it, that might be a little awkward.
Well, luckily neither one of them got it, so I didn't have to worry about that issue, but
And isn't
a
that the
cash
truth? That's the
deal,
way it usually works
yeah,
out.
a cash deal beat us out, so.
Yeah.
I was worried about this with my investors that were just buying up everything. And then my other young couple that were just trying so hard. And I was like, felt so certain way because I like, care about both of my clients, but I found it to be like kind of, I don't know, awkward because in my heart, I wanted the young couple that's been trying so much to get a chance.
And go with your heart. If you don't feel, just like Lori said with dual agency, if you don't feel right about it, don't do it. Listen to the man in your belly. There's plenty of people around here that can help you. Just raise your hand and refer it and tell your clients, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. I want to make sure that you have a coach in your corner that isn't putting their thumb on the scale, even inadvertently. So I talked to my broker. We think that just for the sake of this offer, Susan is a, great asset. She's going to help you to prepare this offer. Are you comfortable with that? I mean, I can still answer questions, but I want you to have someone to help you craft your best offer. Does that sound good? And I don't think anyone is going to condemn you for being honest and listening to your conscience. I certainly won't. I think that's, what those feelings are there for. So, so do that. Now, paragraph C, it, I wish this was like in like blinking fluorescent letters. It's a conflict of interest um, to sell a property that you have a personal financial interest in. If you find yourself in that situation, please raise your hand and ask for help. Um, First problem is the conflict of interest between you and your client. Second uh, problem is your E&O coverage is limited to 50% damages when you're involved in the transaction personally. So you will have less protection in that case. Okay? So just let that be a red flag, something that sticks in your brain. If you're selling your own property, call me first. I'll probably encourage you to ask one of your brokerage buddies to list it for you. So that you can collect full E&O protection and you don't, the listing agent doesn't have a conflict of interest. Or buying agent. So now we start getting into the less important kind of stuff. The copyright stuff, transfer this contract. The buyer agrees that the broker may transfer this contract to another broker when the broker stops doing business or forms a new real estate business. We don't anticipate that happening for us for quite some time. Or the broker will notify the buyer immediately in writing if the broker transfer this contract to another broker. You're not going to have to deal with that. Unless permitted by the buyer or required by law, broker will not knowingly reveal or use any confidential information of the buyer, period. Oh, this paragraph will survive the termination or expiration of this contract. So once a client, always a client when it comes to confidentiality. If they give you information about themselves in, especially anything financial, that remains under lock and key in your mind and your paperwork forever. Now,
Can I throw a little note in here, Justin?
yeah,
Um, on two different occasions, I've had investors, when I've asked for proof of funds with cash deals, when I've asked for proof of funds, you have to be careful and make sure they understand that it's funds required for this transaction. Because twice I've had people give me bank information that was everything they had, and these people were substantial. And I got that back to them as fast as possible, did not make copies, and reiterated it had to be relative to the price at hand, because I didn't want to expose their financial potential to the listing side, nor did
I
I
always
even want
advise
to
them
have
to
it.
reach out to their banker or their financial manager and say, can you
Yeah,
get me a letter on bank
yep,
letterhead,
yep,
uh, with a phone number that I can call to verify that says, Sam Smith is, adequately funded through personal investments to cover the cost of this property and
right.
customary closing costs.
Yeah, for a $53,000 total bombed out fixer, and I get something that says the guy's got $800,000. No, you'll never be able to trace this, so I can tell you that. It was like, oh my God, no.
Yeah.
It's like, and I had no idea, that I knew they were capable, but not. So yeah,
So
protect the client.
protect the client. Yeah. So expertise of a real estate agent. Pennsylvania real estate agents are required to be licensed by the Commonwealth and are obligated to disclose adverse factors about a property that are reasonably apparent to someone with expertise in the marketing of real property. That doesn't mean that you're obligated to identify mud tubes that may be coming from a termite, or, you know, roofing defects or anything like that. So it goes on to specify if the buyer wants information regarding specific conditions or components of a property which are outside the broker's or the licensee's area of expertise, the buyer is encouraged to seek the advice of appropriate professional. If the buyer wants financial, legal, or other advice, the buyer is encouraged to seek the services of an accountant, lawyer, or other appropriate professional. So practice it with me. That is a great question for fill in the blank. You want to be the source of the source, right, MJ? You don't want to
Yep,
be the source of the information itself.
yep.
Often, I will reach out to a zoning officer, verify some information about a zoning district or a particular ordinance, and I will provide that information to my client and ask them to confirm it by calling said zoning officer. Here is their phone number. This is how I understand it. However, I think that you should call and hear that without a filter. And also, yeah, that is a great question for an attorney. A 1031, no idea. Or here's how I understand it to work, but there are some intricacies that I don't have a handle on. You're going to need to reach out to an accountant or a lawyer for the finer details on that. So, deposit money, not a small concept. I break this down to them as, uh, as it's stated in paragraph 26 of the agreement of sale, as the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the broker will keep, the listing broker is going to receive an earnest money deposit. That earnest money deposit is surety that you're not going to walk away for no good reason. It lets them know that you're serious about this deal. And should you breach this contract and they be awarded that money, that's going to go to cover their damages, the mortgage payments that they had to pay to carry this property through to find another buyer, etc. Now, in a good situation, I tell them that money's going to go on your behalf to the satisfactory resolution of this transaction. It's going to go to the settlement table. In a bad situation, maybe we're doing inspections or you can't qualify for mortgage funding and we exercise that contingency, that money is entitled to come back to you. The seller's going to find a new buyer. You're going to hopefully find a new home. It's a bad situation, but in the end, ultimately, everybody's going to be happy. Now, in an ugly situation, you walk away from this transaction for a reason that the seller does not deem legitimate under the contingencies which we elect. And then it's going to be up to mediation or litigation to decide how that money's distributed. And we can go into further describing how that works, but that's usually an adequate paraphrase. Anybody have any feelings or questions on that? I will also go on to say, I don't care if you're, a purple Martian. I don't care what neighborhood you're from. I don't care what your situation is, as long as your money's green. Um, um, I'm not going to discriminate. I'm not going to discriminate from because of our code of ethics, because of my own personal, moral guide. There are plenty of reasons to legitimately discriminate against someone. Being a jerk is not a protected class. And that's part of my discussion. I let them know. Keep it light. Notice 12 or paragraph 12, we let them know that through Megan's law and Megan's list, we can let them know where the bad guys live. and encourage them to seek that information themselves. Buyer inspections. This is my first talk on buyer inspections to the client. We'll also talk about this when we get to the agreement of sale, but it is not only their right, but their responsibility to make sure that that property is in the condition that they expect when they get to the closing table. If they buy it without an inspection, they've given up their right to understand the condition of that property. Buyer is advised to carry out an inspection. The buyer is advised that information regarding properties considered for purchase by the buyer has been provided by the seller or a seller's broker. Such information may include, but is not limited to, the MLS, the disclosure, other reports, taxes, etc. And those are deemed reliable but not guaranteed. Broker has not verified the accuracy of this information, and the buyer is advised to investigate its accuracy. Recordings on the property. The fast and loose of this is we're going to write an agreement of sale. That agreement of sale is, I'm sorry, wrong clause. Recordings on the property. Any person who intentionally intercepts oral communications by electronic or other means without the consent of all parties is guilty of a felony under Pennsylvania law. Does that mean it doesn't happen? No. Buyer should not make recordings on the property that capture the oral statements or other persons. But the buyer should be aware that the seller's property may contain technologies or devices which do so. And the buyer won't hold us accountable for anything that they say in the property that gets them in trouble. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe these people live this way. It smells like 52 cats. And then they go to write an offer on the property and wonder why they don't get it. And then the recovery fund. Anyone tell me what the recovery fund is? Recovery fund, as I explain it, is for someone who is taken advantage of by a real estate professional. The person who's taken advantage of takes that real estate professional to court and wins, receiving a judgment, and then finds out that that professional is penniless. They can take that judgment to the recovery fund and be made whole up to a certain threshold. I can go deeper on that, but I usually don't get into it during this discussion. So the buyer has read and received the consumer notice. This is your checklist. The buyer has read the entire contract before signing. If the buyer is obtaining mortgage financing, the buyer shall promptly deliver to broker a copy of all loan estimates and closing disclosures upon receipt. And the buyer gives permission for the broker to send information about this transaction to the buyer's fax number and or email. And then return of this contract and any addenda and amendments, including return by electronic transmission, bearing the signatures of all parties, constitutes acceptance. And this contract may be executed in one or more counterparts. So this right here is just your checklist of things that you need to make sure to do. Any questions? That is the lion's share of buyer agency. I want to make, in the next 15 minutes, a couple of other notices to you. If your client is uncomfortable with the buyer agency agreement, there is something called a non-exclusive buyer agency agreement that you may use. They are almost identical, except for an exclusive agreement deals in time. A non-exclusive agreement deals with properties. And there is no limit to time on a non-exclusive agreement. If you sign someone to a non-exclusive agreement and show them 123 Main Street, you have earned the commission, basically, unless you abandon that client forever, on that property until, if they purchase it. I don't recommend the Pennsylvania Buyer Home Tour Agreement. This is a company produced document. It's there as a getting to know you. This, the exclusive agreement is you getting married. The non-exclusive is for dating. The Pennsylvania Buyer Home Tour Agreement is nothing but a cup of coffee. You're going to get to know this person, and this meets the minimum requirement of the state of Pennsylvania and the NAR lawsuit settlement arrangement for you to carry somebody across the threshold of a door, of a house. Without the signing of one of these three documents, you may not open the lockbox and take them inside, or you may be in trouble. If you are the listing agent on a home and end up preparing an agreement of sale for someone, I recommend strongly using a non-representation acknowledgement so that you can protect yourself and let them know that you do not work with them, and receive confirmation that they are not working with another broker. Okay? The cooperating broker compensation, you put in your wish list here of what you would like to get paid, or what the listing agent has confirmed to you that you are being paid. And you will sign that and you will send that to the listing broker or agent for acceptance. When are we sending this? Before we have a signed contract. Before you submit that contract. So,
Justin, why do you have to send that before you submit? I usually send it when I submit because I already have a text saying what they're going to pay me.
okay, if you have it in writing and they've communicated it to you, I'm more comfortable with that. But if you've been unable to contact that listing agent,
Okay.
or they this is the first you've talked about it, I think it's good to get something before you send that over. Because what happens if you've not talked, here's a good case in point. One of our agents listed a house. There was 50 showings within the first 3 days it went on the market. 50. Only 3 agents sent him a CBC for confirmation of commission before showing the property. Only 17 of the 50 called him to confirm whether compensation was being offered. No, 25. So roughly right on half. And then there was 17 offers, and some of those didn't have a CBC, or he didn't even talk with those agents before they sent over the agreement. He was offering a CBC, but if he wasn't, and they weren't asking for compensation in the agreement, they would have been out in the cold and wouldn't have been able to be paid on those. But if you're getting a text message from the list agent, that's good to go.
Okay, that's typically what I do. I text them before I show.
Good deal. As long as you have it.
Okay.
I
All
have a
right, everybody.
question, Justin.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. If for some reason you take somebody in and show a house and you don't have a up to date buyer agency with them, what's the fine for that?
$1,000.
Ugh. So you know how we get these, and now we put them in Sky Slope and we forget all about them. I mean, you have to like make sure that they're up to date, especially if you
Yeah.
have buyers that have been searching for a while. So I was showing
Yeah.
my sister-in-law, and I was like, you know what? It's been a while. And sure enough, I had taken her in without an updated one. So just a warning to all.
Yeah, thousand bucks, I think is what that is. But the greater problem is if they see that a bunch, then they can exclude your brokerage from the settlement agreement, and that would be bad.
Yeah. So just keep up with what's going on in that once you put it in Sky Slope and forget about it.
Yep. Yep. All
All
right,
right,
guys, I
thanks.
appreciate you. If you don't have any other questions, we'll wrap it up.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Justin.
Appreciate you. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.